My legitimate elder sister laid a trap, and I ended up marrying into the Eastern Depot by mistake. They say Governor Wang is as gentle as jade, but he could laugh and chat while killing, right in the middle of my zither music. He even liked to use my back as paper, painting on it with ink. I fought to escape. All I got was a divorce letter burned to ash, and a man closing in on me, dangerous and smiling. One stroke, one kiss. Have you decided, madam? It wasn't until that night, beneath the red canopy, when terror struck, that I stumbled upon his deepest secret. This cripple, who held the entire court in his grip, was a real man. My legitimate elder sister made me marry into the Eastern Palace. In the end, she married into the Eastern Palace, and I married into the Eastern Depot. Back when it was time to decide who would marry into the Eastern Palace, my sister and I put on quite a performance of sisterly politeness. Father told us to play rock, paper, scissors. The winner would marry into the Eastern Palace. The loser would marry Governor Wang. My sister and I were close. We made a plan ahead of time. We'd both throw paper every round. That way it would always be a tie and neither of us would have to marry. So there we were, each certain the other would throw paper, and we both threw scissors. We looked at each other and smiled. My sister tugged at the corner of her mouth. Then she leaned in and whispered that she'd throw rock. My mind went blank. Panicking, I believed her. My hand shook, and I threw paper. She threw scissors. That one mistake decided everything. Father decreed that she would marry Crown Prince Henry, and I would go to the Eastern Depot. The night before the wedding, I held my sister. Thinking of all those years together, and that we'd be parted from then on, my heart ached so badly I couldn't stop crying. My sister stroked my head and smiled softly. "Little sister, you can't bear to leave me?" I cried until my face was a mess. "Sister, let's do best, 2 out of 3. People said the men we married were nothing alike. Crown Prince Henry was brutal and cold-blooded, ruthless and cruel. Governor Wang, though, was as gentle as jade, modest and courteous. That comforted me a little. Governor Wang was a eunuch, but at least he was a powerful one. And they said he was mild-tempered. They even said he was quite good-looking. By that logic, aside from being unusable, he sounded like a fine husband. I kept repeating that to myself all the way into the bridal chamber. I sat alone on the bed, the bridal veil covering my head. All I could see were the tips of my embroidered shoes and a strip of wooden floor in front of me. Outside was noisy. It sounded like people were discussing tonight's banquet dishes. A young eunuch complained that the chickens in the kitchen were too wild to catch, and their feathers were hard to pluck. Someone answered from farther away, his voice clear as cold jade. "Pour boiling water over it." Whose voice was that? It sounded so good. Someone called out to Governor Wang. "Governor Wang?" I twisted my fingers together. That was my unusable husband. Choosing banquet dishes was the servant's work, yet he personally told them to scald the chicken with boiling water. And he spoke so gently, even to the servants. It seemed the rumors were true, mild and courteous, like jade. But not long after, I heard someone outside begging on their knees. Servants ran about in chaos. It was strange, but I couldn't exactly go out and look. I waited for someone to come in so I could ask what happened. A young eunuch slipped in, bent at the waist. He stole a glance at me, his face full of terror. He told me that Governor Wang had said, "Pour boiling water over it." But the "it" hadn't been a troublesome chicken. It had been someone who couldn't even catch a chicken. My head nearly exploded. Gentle as jade, courteous and modest. What did I do to deserve such a monstrous lie? "Sister, let's do best, 2 out of 3. I sat alone in the room. The doors and windows were shut tight. My wedding robes were layered and heavy, complicated to the point of suffocating. All I could do was yank off the veil and fan myself with it. The sounds outside slowly died away. Then the door creaked open. I hurriedly draped the veil back over my head. A pair of red boots, embroidered with subtle patterns, came closer and closer. Red boots? That had to be my husband. They said he was humble and polite, but what I'd heard earlier had been ruthless and vicious. Which one was the real him? I kept worrying at the embroidery on my sleeves, watching those boots approach until they stopped beside me. The bed dipped. He sat down next to me. A chill seemed to radiate from him. The red veil blocked most of my view. I could only make out part of his arm, and a pale, long-fingered hand with sharp knuckles. As I stared, cold crept up my neck. My whole body went rigid. He had put his hand on my neck. What was he doing? Was he going to make me warm his hand? Then his fingers began to stroke my neck. They slid down along my arm and stopped at my hand. It felt like a snake, tongue flicking, slowly winding down my arm before coiling around my hand. Wherever that snake passed, my skin tingled and went numb. I didn't dare move. He lifted my hand. A warm breath brushed over the back of it. He brought it to his nose and inhaled. Why? Then something warm touched my skin. He licked it? He licked it? My scalp went numb, goose flesh prickling all over me. So that's it. He wanted my body. But he was a eunuch. What good was wanting? How would a wedding night even work? What was he going to do next? Wait, no, that wasn't right. Why was I worrying about how a eunuch could take me? Shouldn't I be worrying about myself? My heart was in my throat. In the end, my fear was pointless. After doing all that, he left. He just left. Of course there was no next. A eunuch through and through. I thought he craved my body. Now it seemed my body truly had no use at all. That night, Alexander never came again. I sat on the bed, swaying with exhaustion. In the end, I toppled back fully dressed, pulled a quilt over myself, and fell asleep. The next day, I woke up aching all over, so I decided to go out for some air. The moment I opened the door, the world opened up with it. Outside stood a stone table, and nearby a peach tree. Perhaps the blossoms were too full, too heavy. Its branches couldn't bear the weight, and petals drifted down in soft flurries. Beneath the tree stood a man, pale and tall. He turned his head to look at me. His eye sockets were slightly deep, his eyes long and full. His profile was sharp. Standing in that rain of petals, he made one word rise in my mind. Stunning. I stared for a moment, then thought, someone waiting outside this early must be one of Alexander's attendants. He stood straight and handsome. I couldn't help feeling sorry for him. I called him over and asked him to help me sort out my dowry. He didn't speak. He nodded slowly in agreement. He carried my trunks into the room. When he came close, a jagged scar on his neck stood out. It looked like a burn. Thinking of Alexander's boiling water from last night, I felt uneasy and asked, "That injury on your neck, did your master mistreat you?" He stopped what he was doing and glanced at me. Still silent, he nodded again, slowly. So Alexander really was nothing like the rumors. Twisted inside, merciless even to his own people. And here I was, with all these belongings from home, while this attendant hauled each heavy chest in and arranged everything neatly. I couldn't help getting angry on his behalf. I tried to comfort him. Don't take it to heart. People who climb to his position probably have something wrong in the head. I patted my chest and promised, if he bullies you again, come to me. If he's Demon Judge, then I'm Demon Judge's ancestor. Carried away, I even gave his perky backside 2 encouraging pats. That afternoon, a servant brought me to see Alexander. We passed through a long covered corridor, turning this way and that. In the end, we arrived at the depot prison of the Eastern Depot. The depot prison was dim. Torture instruments hung on all 4 walls. Wails rose from every direction. I saw the attendant who had carried my trunks that morning. A drop of blood clung to his cheek. A whip was in his hand as he walked toward us. Only then did I realize I didn't even know his name. I was about to call him when the person beside me had already bent low. Governor Wang. I stared at him, at a loss. Governor. Governor Wang? He called him Governor Wang? So this was Alexander? I had made the mighty Governor Wang carry boxes for me? I had said to his face that something was wrong with his head. I'd even mouthed off about being his ancestor. Alexander gave me a gentle smile. Maybe I should just move somewhere else. I'm tired. My hands wouldn't stop shaking because I suddenly remembered I'd patted his backside twice for encouragement. It was pretty springy. In that instant, it felt like all the blood in my body froze solid. Alexander smiled faintly and took my hand, leading me deeper into the depot prison. The farther we went, the darker it grew. Tiger benches stood around us, whips hung on the walls. I heard lashes striking flesh. I heard skin and meat tearing. I heard people screaming like beasts. My legs went weak. Alexander supported me, almost thoughtfully. He was polite and measured, his voice clear as jade. "Do you like Demon Judge's hell?" He turned his face toward me. The last words drew out, slow and sharp. My little ancestor? I swallowed hard, my lips trembling. The air was thick with the stink of blood. The prisoners' curses grew more obscene by the second. Their cries sounded like animals. I couldn't stand. Alexander held me up, both hands pressing on my shoulders. His smile remained generous and proper. "Look, who is this?" Slowly, I raised my head. Standing before me was a servant I'd brought from my family home. Yesterday, I'd told him to return my bracelet to my parents, to let them know I was safe. I looked at Alexander, confused. "He tried to take the Eastern Depot's secrets out," Alexander said. "I caught him." I stared at the servant in disbelief. He'd been beaten beyond recognition, collapsed on the ground. I turned to Alexander. "You suspect me?" He smiled. "What husband wouldn't trust his wife? Today I'm only warning you not to trust people too easily." He patted his own chest, then drew my bracelet from inside his robe. But the bracelet was fine jade, polished smooth, glowing softly. He lifted it to his lips and let them brush it lightly. "I've tasted Madame's flavor," he said, smiling. But his eyes were so cold they turned my whole body to ice. "It's exactly the same as what's on this." Alexander suspected me, or rather, he didn't trust anyone. He thought my father had married me into the Eastern Depot to steal its secrets. People with twisted minds always assume everyone else is just as twisted. My father wasn't. He simply wanted to cling to power. If he truly had that kind of cunning, he wouldn't still be a third-rank official at his age. I didn't know whether to defend myself. I was about to speak when someone reported from outside. The imperial consort had arrived. At the words "imperial consort," Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose. Then he turned and asked me something completely unrelated. "Can you play the zither?" As a proper young lady, I could. I nodded slowly. Alexander had someone prepare a zither and a stool. Only after I was ready did he allow the imperial consort to enter. She wore splendid robes. Her beauty was striking, and she swept in with an aggressive air. Before she could speak, Alexander cut in first. "I'm in a good mood today. I'll allow you 3 sentences." I froze. I didn't understand why he spoke to the imperial consort like that, and the music in my hands faltered. Alexander looked back at me and motioned for me to continue. The imperial consort didn't hold back. She launched into a torrent. "What are you doing? Do you still remember our agreement? Have you kept your promise?" Alexander lowered his head with a smile, listening to every word. Only when she finally snapped and shouted, "Say something," did he raise his head. He pressed a finger to her lips. "Shh," he said. "That was 1 sentence too many." His smile stayed mild. "Just 1, what a pity." Then he waved a hand. Turning his back to her, he faced me. My vision flashed red. Bright blood burst from the imperial consort's pale throat. Alexander's men slit her neck. Even if the imperial clan had declined and eunuchs held power, she was still the imperial consort, still the emperor's woman. Alexander killed her as easily as breathing. It was beyond reckless. A beauty who'd been alive before me only moments ago now stared wide-eyed as she crumpled to the floor. 3 sentences. She was allowed 3. 1 more, and she died. I shook all over at the sight. Without realizing it, my music broke off again. Alexander stood before me, backlit. He frowned slightly and gestured with his hand. 3 times. I stared. 3 times. The music could only stop 3 times, and I had already stopped twice. The last time I couldn't stop again. I played for my life. My fingers plucked the strings, notes spilling out, like a silver bottle cracking, water bursting forth, like large pearls and small pearls falling onto a jade plate. Sometimes slow, sometimes urgent. Alexander listened, entranced. He even closed his eyes. I watched his long lashes tremble. I watched the shadow his nose cast across his face. Smiling, he said, "Don't you think this piece is perfect for killing?" "No, I don't." The thought had barely formed when my hand trembled. With a sharp twang, I looked up at him. A string had snapped. The music stopped. The 3rd time. I stared at him, panic rising in my throat. He stood backlit, his outline blurred, his eyes narrowed as he sized me up. I glanced at the beauty on the floor, dead, motionless, her eyes still wide open. I didn't dare make a sound. Alexander followed my gaze. Then he smiled and said, "You saw it too. I always mean what I say." He walked toward me, unhurried and steady. My body shrank back on its own. The man before me wore a gentle smile as he took my hand. His hand was icy. The moment I touched him, I shivered. He tilted his head and whispered against my ear, "Don't be afraid. For me, you'll always be the exception." What did that mean? Exception? He wasn't going to kill me? I stared at him, eyes wide. Seeing my expression, he burst out laughing. Scared? I nodded, then shook my head hard. He narrowed his eyes. "Want to go home?" I nodded again, then shook my head. I'd only married into this house last night. If I was sent back today, it wasn't about me. It was my father's face. Where would he put it? If he lost that much standing, would I even have a way to live? As I was thinking, Alexander drew out a single syllable, slow and teasing. And suddenly I understood. I was his lawful wife, married openly. If he truly intended to bear the crime of killing his wife, why go to the trouble of marrying me first? So he was only trying to scare me. Without thinking, I tightened my grip and held his hand back. "I'm already married. I'm not going back." I held on firmly and looked up at him. "From now on, you're my home." His pupils widened. For a heartbeat, something flashed in those eyes that were always frozen over. Then it was gone. I thought that after that, I'd at least sleep peacefully for a few days. Alexander was a powerful eunuch. People with power are always busy. Busy enough to forget I existed would be best of all. But I never expected I wouldn't even get a single good night's sleep. The next morning, I was jolted awake by knocking. I almost suspected Alexander hadn't killed me yesterday because he didn't want it to be quick. Maybe he planned to torture me to death slowly. The servants came in to report that Alexander wanted to paint a beauty portrait today. He lacked a beauty, so he wanted me to go over. After I powdered my face and drew my brows for his masterpiece, I went to his study. On the table were a brush, ink, and an inkstone, everything except paper. Wasn't he painting a beauty portrait? The beauty had arrived and he didn't even have paper. So this was how he treated a beauty? My brows knit. I was angry, but I didn't dare speak. Alexander stood by the table, tall and straight. His face was cool and distant, yet he wore an ill-timed smile. He dipped the brush lightly into the ink. A so-called beauty portrait isn't a portrait with a beauty in it. It's painting with the beauty as the paper. Painting on the beauty. Using me as paper? He lifted the brush. His lashes flicked up as he looked at me. "Your clothes, what are you waiting for?" I froze. But then, thinking it through, I almost understood. Alexander had looks, money, and power. But his body was incomplete. His heart had to be twisted, too. A twisted man coming up with twisted methods was only natural. I even felt a trace of pity for him. Taking my clothes off, he could only look anyway. If he wanted to do more, it wouldn't be hard for me. It would be hard for him. I was already married, so I reached for my sash, but he set the brush down and raised an eyebrow at me. Scared? I wasn't. If you're scared, say you're scared. His smile deepened. To prove I wasn't scared at all, I sped up. He said again, "If you're afraid, I'll give you a divorce letter tomorrow. Then you can go home." What was wrong with him? Couldn't he see my clothes were practically about to fly into his face? Oh, I got it. For making me play the zither to this beauty portrait, he couldn't stop bringing up sending me home. So this whole performance was meant to drive me away. Better yet, make me leave willingly. I refused. I stretched out both hands and tipped up my chin at him. "I'm not afraid. I want my husband to help me." I watched Alexander's hand tremble, like withered blossoms dropping one after another to the ground. I'd still been thinking too simply. Only one piece was left. A red belly band. Alexander's skin was very pale. His lips were a vivid pink and his eyes were dark and bottomless. His cold fingers traced my spine. "This paper is soft and delicate. I'm afraid I'll tear it." I felt the ties loosen behind me. The belly band barely held on the verge of slipping. Embarrassed, I stepped forward and hugged him. His body jolted. But at once he picked up the brush again and with a casual tug, tore away the last barrier. "Let's begin." I felt the cold brush tip glide over my skin. The ink seeped into me bit by bit, carrying a chill. Alexander held my waist as he painted. I shuddered, and the brushstroke seemed to slip. Above my head came Alexander's displeased intake of breath. Tense, I clenched the fabric at his leg. "It's done." Above me came his satisfied laugh. He took up a bronze mirror so I could see the pattern on my back. It was peach blossoms, willows, and swallows. The willow branches were slender, the peach blossoms a pale pink. Spring swallows darted past the blooms. Alexander's hand still caressed the petals on my back with lingering tenderness. As he traced them, he said, "Next time, will you let your husband paint the front? Then the flower's center will already be there." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Right, wife?" I said nothing. My face burned as I buried my head between his legs. I thought the painting was finished. That should have been the end of it, but Alexander's hand still didn't leave my body. Instead, it grew even more possessive. I planned to mount this painting and hang it in my study. Mount it? That was my back. How could he mount it and hang it in the study? Unless... I jerked my head up and looked at him. He was looking back at me, his gaze intimate, unreadable. A cold dread rose in me. The legs beneath me were shaking, and Alexander was holding back laughter. Was it that funny? He patted my head and said softly, "Don't be afraid. I'm only joking with you." Joking? He was moody and unpredictable every day. Who knew which words were real and which were fake? I stayed sprawled across him and refused to get up. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be humiliated again. And I didn't want his pointless jokes. Alexander tried to lift me off him, but it was as if he noticed something. His body went rigid. He reached out and touched my face, then snatched his hand back as if burned. Crying? So my tears had been falling on their own, and I hadn't even noticed. I didn't answer. I only felt the air beside me turn colder, as though someone were staring without blinking. I kept my head down. I couldn't see his eyes. I didn't know what expression he wore. Then I felt a weight on the top of my head. Alexander was stroking my hair, inch by inch, very gently. His voice was cool and clean, like jade. "You should understand by now, I'm not a good person. Take my advice, go home early." Then he stood and left. My body was limp, on the verge of collapse. I could only brace myself on the floor, as if I needed him to tell me. This time I was going home no matter what. Even if I had to smash every pot and sell every piece of iron. Even if it meant we both went down together, I was going home. Here, Alexander did whatever he pleased. His moods could turn in a blink. Staying by him meant my life was always under threat. And he always had strange new ideas to torment me. Who could endure it? For a comfortable rest of my life, even if I went home and father whipped me for 3 days and nights, I'd still go back. I packed at once. To move fast, I only took a few pieces of jewelry and some valuables. With my bundle on my back, I knocked on Alexander's door, intending to demand a divorce letter. I knocked for a long time. No one answered. I pushed the door open carefully. The moment I stepped in, a cold voice said, "Get out." It was Alexander, but it sounded strange, unsteady, like he couldn't quite control his voice. I walked a few steps closer. He was wrapped in a quilt, curled on the bed, deathly pale. Cold sweat covered his forehead. Black hair clung to his temples. Even his lips had lost their color. What was wrong with him? "Governor Wang, what's wrong?" I asked, stepping forward. I put my hand to his forehead, burning hot. "A fever?" He finally looked up at me. "The divorce letter is on the table. Take it, then get out." Alexander, known for being gentle and courteous, actually used the words "get out." His eyes were heavy with darkness, like clouds that never cleared. I obeyed and walked out. I even closed the door for him. Before I left, I looked back. Those eyes, always gloomy, had gone completely dark. Not long after, I kicked the door open again. Hugging my own quilt, I ran to his bedside, panting. The man on the bed looked stunned. "Didn't I tell you to go? Why are you back?" I tucked the quilt around him carefully, even stuffing in the corners. "Governor Wang, I won't go yet. I'll wait until you're better, then I..." His gaze softened. Before I could finish, a hand grabbed me hard and yanked me into the quilt. Right now, I regretted everything, bitterly. Why didn't I listen, take the divorce letter and leave? Why did I come back? Being soft on an enemy is being cruel to yourself. Now I was trapped in Alexander's arms, his breath brushing my forehead. I curled up tight, even my breathing turned careful. Thank goodness he was sick. He didn't seem fully conscious. Otherwise, I was sure he'd toss me off the bed. With Alexander, normal people couldn't imagine what he might do. Holding one position too long made my body go numb, so I tried to stretch. Before I could, everything tightened. Alexander hugged me even harder. "Help! Help!" Seriously. Now I was terrified of dying. It felt like being wrapped up by a giant python, like my life could be squeezed out in an instant. His scent surrounded me. My nose pressed to his chest. I took a small breath. Grass and a faint, milky sweetness. How was that possible? The infamous Governor Wang. Shouldn't he smell like blood? As I was thinking, the big hand around me rubbed up and down my back. Above my head came Alexander's voice. "You're so warm, my little stove." In the haze, I saw Alexander. His face was inches from mine. Each lash stood out, curling upward. His eyes were long and full. His lips were petal pink. How could anyone be this beautiful? And why was I so close to Alexander? Was I dreaming? It had to be a dream. I leaned in and nuzzled his cheek. Governor Wang, get better soon. His eyes were bright, like cold stars in a dark night. Why did this dream feel so real? Wait, no, why didn't this feel like my room? I jolted awake. I remembered going into Alexander's room, him being sick, and him pulling me into the quilt. The sky was pale. Was it the next day? I actually fell asleep in Alexander's bed. He was smiling faintly. I sprang upright. Not a dream. And I just nuzzled him. If I could, I'd move somewhere no one knew me and start over. Alexander held his head and looked at me. While I wasn't clear-minded, you climbed into my bed. I don't need you to repeat it. I remember. No, wait. How did it become me taking advantage of you? His mouth curved. It's a pity I'm incomplete. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you. Disappointment wasn't new, but somehow that smile didn't look like self-mockery. It looked like teasing. Want to lose yourself with me until heaven and earth go dark and you forget what day it is? I shook my head quickly. Not disappointed. Not disappointed. I was in despair. He gave a mocking smile and murmured by my ear, "What are you waiting for?" I looked at him, confused. In an instant, he wiped the smile from his face. Get down. And just like that, I was driven off the bed. Fine, I wouldn't just get down. I'd go back. I'd pick up the divorce letter, return to my parents' home, and from then on, the sky would be high and the road far. We'd each mind our own. But then something happened that made my chest tighten. The divorce letter he'd left on the table was gone. I was about to sneak out, then turn back. Governor Wang, the div. Alexander, who had been lively a moment ago, clutched his head again. My head hurts. Whatever it is, we'll talk tomorrow. But, even with his headache, he spared me a glance, glaring. What, you want to be mounted and framed? I shut up at once. Fine. A few more days living under someone else's roof. These days were not easy. Not easy didn't even begin to cover it. They were terrifying. Whenever I thought about how I'd slept in the same bed with Alexander for a whole night, even the braised pork in my bowl lost its taste. Then one night, long past midnight, while I was asleep, something cold slipped in beside me. It yanked me out of my dream. There was an icy body under my quilt. I started shaking like a sieve, like I was having a fit. The shameless person next to me said, "Warm me up, little stove." A strong reek of alcohol hit my face. It was Alexander, and he'd been drinking. What was he doing, looking like that and still daring to climb into someone's bed at night? That was how you provoked people into... No. The room was dim. His face was blurred. Long lashes hung low, his eyes dazed. A faint flush stained his cheeks and the skin beneath his eyes. He didn't look like the usual Governor Wang, who never showed emotion. He looked like a fragile, beautiful boy. He actually started tearing at his own clothes. I watched his pale shoulder appear, then vanish again. I hurried to stop him. "What are you doing?" With one yank, his shoulder was exposed. Huge burns stretched from his neck down to his shoulder blade. I froze. Wasn't that the scar I'd seen the first time? "I want to tell you about the suffering I've had," he said, burying his head in the hollow of my shoulder so the scars showed even more clearly. I don't know why. That fuzzy head even rubbed against me. "I just want to tell you." Maybe the moonlight was too stirring, or maybe tonight's Alexander was too unlike himself. My heart shifted just a little. "I always have a way," he said, breathing against my neck. "But with you, why do I feel like I have no way at all?" I didn't move. His hot breath washed over my neck, like it might scorch my skin. I tried to struggle out of his arms. I put a hand on his chest and gave a small push. Somehow I was pulled right back in. His big hand stroked my back a few hard times. "Want me to mount and frame it?" My whole body went rigid. I fell silent. I waited for him to let go, until I heard his breathing even out. Wait, he fell asleep just like that? I wanted to kick him away, but looking at his face, I couldn't quite do it. So we stayed locked together until I fell asleep too. The next morning we stared at each other. He frowned first. "Why are you here?" "Isn't that what I should ask?" I pointed at the bed. "Governor Wang, this is my room." He acted as if he hadn't heard, and even turned it around on me. "Why are you so close to me?" "Last night, who was the one who wouldn't let me move away?" I obediently tried to get off the bed, but the Lord beside me spoke again. Who said you could be that far from me? Was his fever still not gone? Did it cook his brain that day? It was always you. I never would have dreamed that from that day on, he'd become completely unrestrained. For Governor Wang, climbing into quilts was never a one-time thing. It was once, and then countless times. With a face like his, he shouldn't have such a strange habit. It made it far too easy for people to lose control. And in the end, the one who'd suffer would be him. I suddenly felt he became a eunuch to protect himself. And it wasn't just climbing into my bed. Every time I woke up, he was holding me in his sleep. That was the strangest part. I didn't understand it. The night before, we'd clearly been sleeping separately. Then by morning, I'd be stuffed into his arms. It was suffocating. And whenever I tried to escape, I'd be dragged back. It made me suspect he wasn't asleep at all. Was he trying to smother me like this? I endured that too. Until one morning, I woke early and felt something hard pressed against me in the bed. Without thinking, I pushed it. Then I realized what it was, and I shot upright. Governor Wang? How had he hidden that in the palace for so long? Now I knew his secret. Would he kill me to silence me? Would he mount and frame me? As I was thinking, Governor Wang pressed me back down. His voice was right at my ear. I don't want to let you go anymore. Stay with me. Let's just stay like this, together. As for Alexander crawling into my quilt at night, I told myself it was because he was cold on the inside. So he needed something warm, all the time. Unfortunately, that something was me. But that explanation didn't really hold up. For example, every time he came in, his body was clearly warm. So where did this cold on the inside come from? Until I noticed that every day there was a floor full of ashes in Alexander's room. A young eunuch cleaning up tried to curry favor and told me, Governor Wang warms himself by the fire every day. He says he's afraid you'll get cold when you sleep at night. So he wasn't cold on the inside. He was blatantly taking advantage of me. And it still wasn't over. In the ashes, I found scraps of the divorce letter. Only a tiny, pitiful corner was left with the words divorce letter still on it. No wonder I could never find it. He'd burned it. What was wrong with him? Before, he went to such lengths to make me leave. Now he went to such lengths to keep me from leaving. He played both the hero and the villain. I kicked open his door. Alexander, weren't you the one telling me to go? Where's my divorce letter? Alexander sat at the table reading. He smiled. There was only one divorce letter. If it's lost, there won't be another for the rest of your life. Then I'll divorce you. That works, right? He seemed to think it over. How about this? Last time I painted on your body. This time you write the divorce letter on my body. All right? He stood. The condition is, for every stroke you write, I get to kiss you once. He closed in step by step. I backed away step by step until he pinned me against the table. He lifted his brows and smiled. So, where should we start?